Good morning. On a Friday in June, Margaret Ellison walked out of the office she had worked in for 31 years, went home, and reorganized her spice cabinet twice before Tuesday. She told her daughter it felt like freedom. 18 months later, she was gripping a cane, sleeping 4 broken hours a night, and letting the phone ring when her old co-workers called. No accident, no diagnosis, nothing anyone could point to and say, "That's when it happened." Her doctor had a name for what he watched happen to her instead, the fastest, most silent unraveling in the entire human lifespan. And he did not say it to be dramatic. He said it because he'd watched it happen to hundreds of patients before her. Before I tell you what it is, hit subscribe right now, because this is the first video in a series pulling back the curtain on exactly what your doctor isn't telling you about the decade that decides everything. And the next one goes even further. That decade is 65 to 75, 10 years. And according to the geriatrician who has spent his career studying it, Dr. Carter, it isn't a slow decline at all. It's a fork in the road, and most people don't even realize they're standing on it. In his words, by the time a family notices something is wrong, the decline didn't start that day. It started years earlier. In 5 specific places almost nobody is watching. We're going to name all 5 right now using Margaret's story and the research behind it, and by the end you'll know exactly why some people hit 80 still gardening, still traveling, still chasing grandkids around a backyard, while others vanish into decline years before their bodies ever technically fail them. Here's the first one, and it's the one that should scare you the most. Starting at 60, the average adult silently loses 3 to 5% of their muscle mass every decade, and most people never notice until it's already stealing things from them, not gym mirror muscle, functional muscle, the kind that lets you carry 2 grocery bags up a flight of stairs without thinking about it. Margaret had that muscle once. 2 years later, she was stopping halfway up her own staircase, hand white-knuckled on the railing, waiting for her lungs to catch up. Picture a man who used to bounce up off the floor after wrestling with his grandkids and now needs both arms and a coffee table just to stand. That's not aging in the abstract. That's sarcopenia. And here's what almost no doctor says out loud in the exam room. Muscle isn't cosmetic. It regulates blood sugar. It protects your bones. It runs your immune system in the background like a security detail you didn't know you had. Lose the muscle, and you don't just lose strength. You lose your body's ability to defend itself. And here's the number that should genuinely unsettle you. Falls are already the #1 cause of injury death after 65. But if you break a hip in this decade, 1 in 4 people don't survive the year. Not from the fracture. From what comes after it. Pneumonia from lying still too long, blood clots, the psychological free fall of suddenly losing your independence. And the single biggest factor separating the people who walk again from the people who never do isn't age. It's how much muscle and functional strength they had the moment before they hit the ground. That's why doctors are starting to treat strength training after 65 less like a lifestyle choice and more like a prescription, right up there with a statin or a flu shot. 2 to 3 sessions a week, resistance bands, body weight squats, nothing fancy. Multiple studies show it slows sarcopenia and, in some cases, reverses it. The muscle a 68-year-old builds this year isn't vanity. It might be the deciding factor in whether she walks back into her own home after a hospital stay or never does. Second domino, and this one is sneakier because it doesn't hurt. Chronic low-grade inflammation. Researchers call it inflammaging, and unlike the inflammation from a twisted ankle, this one gives you nothing to see. No swelling, no fever, no warning sign that sends you to urgent care. It's a low fire burning quietly for years, damaging blood vessels, joints, and brain tissue while you feel completely fine. This slow burn has been tied to nearly every disease we associate with old age. Heart disease, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, and increasingly, dementia. But here's the twist that should give you hope instead of dread. This fire is not simply lit by the calendar. It's fed by visceral fat, processed sugar, bad sleep, and chronic stress, which means it can also be put out. Diets loaded with omega-3s, color, and fiber measurably lower these markers within months. Even losing 5 to 10% of belly fat shows up in blood work as a real, quantifiable drop in inflammation. This was never purely a biological clock. It was a bill coming due for decades of habits. And the good news is, bills can be renegotiated. Now here's the one doctors are only recently willing to say out loud with a straight face. Loneliness is as dangerous as a pack of cigarettes a day. This is where Margaret's story stops being physical and turns into something closer to heartbreak. Landmark public health research has tied chronic isolation in older adults to a 29% jump in heart disease risk and a 32% jump in stroke risk. But the number that actually lands, the one that should stop you mid-scroll, is this. Researchers have calculated that the mortality impact of persistent loneliness rivals smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. Read that again. Sitting alone in a quiet house isn't just sad. Biologically, your body treats it like poison. Chronic isolation keeps your stress response, your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, switched on far longer than it's built for. Cortisol stays elevated. Immune function drops. Blood pressure climbs. And brain scans of isolated seniors show measurable shrinkage in the hippocampus, the exact region responsible for memory, compared to peers who stayed socially connected. This is precisely why retirement, the thing we're sold as the reward, the finish line, the golden years, can quietly become one of the most dangerous transitions of a person's life. Work gave people structure, purpose, and daily contact they never realized they were leaning on until it vanished overnight. For Margaret, her daughter watched it go in order. First, the coworker calls stopped, then the walks stopped, then eventually, the will to leave the house at all. Fourth, sleep. And this is the connection neuroscience has only nailed down in the last 10 years. So pay attention, because most people your doctor's age didn't learn this in medical school. Deep, slow-wave sleep triggers something called the glymphatic system, your brain's overnight power wash. It flushes out metabolic waste, including a protein called beta-amyloid, the same protein that clumps into the plaques found in Alzheimer's brains. Here's the problem. Aging naturally shrinks the amount of deep sleep you get, even if you're perfectly healthy, and that shrinkage accelerates specifically in this 65 to 75 window. Less deep sleep means less nightly cleanup. Less cleanup means more buildup. More buildup is exactly what researchers now believe fuels cognitive decline. Multi-year studies tracking older adults found that chronic poor sleepers, the tossers, the frequent wakers, the ones who never feel rested, scored measurably worse on cognitive testing years later than good sleepers, even after controlling for every other health factor. This is why more neurologists are arguing sleep deserves the same medical respect as blood pressure, not a shrug and a joke about getting older. Fixed sleep and wake times. No screens the hour before bed. Skip the nightcap, since alcohol may knock you out faster, but it shreds your deep sleep. And stop dismissing the snoring, because untreated sleep apnea is quietly starving the brain of its nightly cleanup crew. Fifth, and this is the one that ties the other four together like a knot. Purpose. It's the hardest thing to put in a lab, and yet the data on it is some of the strongest in the entire field. Longitudinal studies tracking seniors for years found that a strong sense of purpose predicts lower mortality, independent of how healthy someone already is. Two people, same physical condition, different sense of meaning, different odds of being alive 5 years later. One major study found seniors with a strong sense of purpose had roughly a 15% lower risk of death than those without it, even after adjusting for every other variable researchers could control for. Why would something so intangible move a number that concrete? Because purpose changes behavior. People with purpose exercise more. They keep their doctor's appointments. They sleep better because they have a reason to. And purpose appears to directly lower inflammatory markers and calm the stress response, looping right back to the two dangers we already covered. None of these 5 things live in isolation. Lose your purpose, you move less. Move less, you lose muscle, and inflammation climbs. Inflammation and isolation wreck your sleep. Bad sleep tanks your mood and your motivation to reconnect. It's a spiral, but a spiral has a direction, which means it can be reversed. And that's exactly what happened to Margaret. Her daughter, watching her mother disappear in slow motion, finally got her to see Dr. Carter. He didn't reach for a prescription pad. He handed her a short list: 2 strength sessions a week at the senior center, a standing Tuesday lunch with 2 former co-workers, a fixed bedtime, and a Thursday morning volunteer shift reading to kids at the library. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive. 14 months later, the cane was in the closet. That's not a miracle. It's exactly what the research predicts happens when you hit all 5 factors at once instead of ignoring them one at a time. So here's what actually interrupts the spiral. Resistance training, 2 to 3 times a week, even beginner level, to directly fight the muscle loss driving fall risk and metabolic collapse. An anti-inflammatory plate, vegetables, fiber, healthy fats, less processed sugar, to put out the fire nobody can see but everybody eventually pays for. Social contact that's scheduled, not accidental, treated with the same non-negotiable weight as a medication, because loneliness left on autopilot almost never fixes itself. Sleep protected like a vital sign, because your brain's nightly cleanup crew depends on it. And a deliberate, ongoing hunt for purpose once the identity of career disappears, whether that's mentoring, volunteering, learning something new, or simply showing up for family more often, because purpose doesn't arrive on its own. You build it. 1 Tuesday lunch at a time, exactly like Margaret did. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. 65 to 75 isn't a slide. It's a fork, and everyone who reaches it is being routed down one path or the other, whether they know it or not. The people who hit 80 still strong, still sharp, still surrounded by people who matter to them, didn't win a genetic lottery. In almost every case, they address these 5 things during this exact window, on purpose or by accident. And the people who instead become frail, isolated, and diminished by 75 are rarely victims of aging itself. They're living with a decade of small, invisible declines that were never named and never interrupted, the way Margaret's very nearly weren't. Dr. Carter's verdict, after years of watching this play out patient after patient, is blunt. Aging is not the enemy. What actually decides the quality of someone's final decades isn't the number of candles on the cake. It's what happens, or doesn't happen, in this one 10-year window. Give the body movement, nourishment, connection, rest, and meaning, and it remains astonishingly capable of adapting and healing well into the 70s and beyond. Ignore all 5, and the decline follows a curve that's depressingly predictable. Address even a couple of them seriously, and that same curve bends, sometimes dramatically, even if you're starting later than you think is possible. If this changed how you're going to think about the next 10 years of your life, or your parents' next 10 years, don't let it vanish into the feed. Subscribe now, because we're going deeper in the next video into the specific warning signs your doctor won't flag for you, the subtle shifts in memory, mood, and behavior that families write off as just getting older, when they're actually early, often reversible signals that can change everything that comes next. That video is coming. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll see you there.